Hey, we're live here tonight. Big show. Mark Weiss here. Doug Gladstone joining in for the fun. We've got David Clyde, former number one pick, 1973 baseball free agent draft, and a man who I believe debuted on the pitcher's mound but 2 weeks after his high school graduation. He'll be joining us probably in about 10 minutes. Until then, you got Doug and myself and any of our other folks on the outside who are popping in, saying hello, and asking some questions. So, good evening, Mr. Gladstone. How you be?
Mr. Weiss, I be fine, eubonically, or any other which way. Yes, David Clyde was the first-round pick in the 73 draft, and let me tell you something, folks. I went back, did a little research. John Stearns was number 2, and he was drafted as a shortstop by the Phillies. Robin Yount, drafted number 3 by the Brewers, and Dave Winfield, drafted number 4 by the San Diego Padres. They were the first 4 people in the draft of 1973. 2 Hall of Famers, 1 tough-as-nails catcher, and our guest of honor tonight, who I will tell you once told me that, some people have said David is the poster boy for, he's the Steven Strasburg of his generation. He's able to joke about his experiences. He really wasn't a failure. He just didn't have a lot of success, and he'll be the first one to admit that. But before we get talking about David Clyde and where he fits into our podcast tonight, Mark, you were telling me off camera about this. We actually both read a Bruce Markison, the very talented director of research and education at the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. Bruce posted was it a New York Post article? Did he post a Post article about something involving 2 former Met employees? I'm not as well grounded on the issue as you are, Mark. Why don't you take it away?
Well, I can give it to you in a nutshell. Bruce did post it, and by the way, a shout out to Bruce. He's going to appear with us here and there as time goes on during the course of this year. He does wonderful work up at the Hall of Fame, but he also posts a lot of great stuff on Facebook that are thought-provoking. And he posted an article in the New York Post about 2 Met employees who said an off-color joke, and I didn't find out what the joke was, how off-color it is, but in today's day and age, everyone gets offended by something, and it turns out that somebody did get offended and recorded it, showed it to the Mets, and those 2 people were terminated. Now, my question is, and we talked to John DeVito about it before, but I throw it out to anybody else, what does behind closed doors mean? If you're behind closed doors, does it mean, guess what, it's private and anything we say in here stays in here? Or does it mean that if anyone can hear it, then they're able to record it and they can do whatever they want? And did the Mets have justification in firing those 2 guys? That's the other thing, too, because one guy said the joke and the other guy just laughed. Now, was he laughing to be polite? Sometimes someone tells a joke, you laugh to be polite because you don't want to insult them. And other times you laugh and maybe you egg them on a little bit. But whatever the case is, that's what happened. So I just want everyone's opinion on that.
Folks, trust me, Mark Weiss has laughed at so many of my jokes, and they are not funny. Believe me. See, there you go.
Was that my cue?
That was your cue. Ba-dum-bum.
Ba-dum-bum. So, yeah, I mean, and it was the PA announcer for the team. So, I mean, that's a pretty high-profile job in the organization. And my assumption is that any good lawyer worth his weight, in writs is going to be able to file a wrongful termination suit against them. It wouldn't be the first time the Mets lost this year, that's for sure, and not the last. So,
are we hearing crickets out there, or is everyone watching the home run derby tonight on ESPN?
Yeah, would that be the Yankee-Indian game?
Well, between Encarnacion and Aaron Judge, and is Sanchez still on the DL?
I believe Sanchez is on the DL. Not that he was performing all that well when he was active, to be honest. What was he getting, like 198 or something? As Keith Hernandez says, he was on the interstate.
Yeah, he might have been above the Mendoza line, but not by too much.
Yeah, well, that's true. Nowadays, the Mendoza line doesn't matter as long as you get in home runs.
That's true. Here's another truism. The All-Star selections, every year, somebody is snubbed. And quite honestly, and I know a lot of Yankee fans are going to be annoyed at me, but I have no problem with Jesus Aguilar winning the vote. I think it was Jean Segura in the NL and Jesus Aguilar in the final vote of the fans. And anyone who says that they wanted to see, last year's NL MVP, who is so far struggling in the AL with the Yankees, it would have been nice to see Giancarlo. But let's face it, Jesus Aguilar deserves, in my opinion, and it's only my opinion that matters to me, I preferred Jesus Aguilar over Giancarlo Stanton. What I think is unconscionable, and I haven't checked the final roster yet, but I'm sure that Blake Snell, with a sub-2.00 ERA, probably has already been added to replace Justin Verlander on the AL squad. I just don't know how he didn't get picked by the fans, by the players and the AL managers and the American League to begin with, because he deserves to be on that AL roster.
I actually have the answer to that question. What happened is the players were complaining about that same thing, and they said one of the reasons that happened is because the vote was taken 2 or 3 weeks before his last 3 starts when he was just unconscious, and his ERA went from 12th in the league down to like 2nd or 3rd or 1st or something like that. So they said that when they voted, which was so far ahead of time, his numbers just weren't up there, and they didn't, recognize him.
Well, I did not know that answer, but is it Jarrett Cole or Garrett Cole of the Astros? He had the opposite problem. He's been, okay the last couple of weeks, but he started out like a house on fire. And he's on the roster because of that heated start, not because of his last couple of starts.
I think Mr. Clyde just joined us.
Doug?
Well, that sounds like David Clyde, so it's my honor. I'm going to introduce this gentleman in the only way I know how, by being sycophantic. Okay, Mark, you should have laughed. That was another ha-ha this moment.
I was going to translate that for our listeners and say that means you're kissing butt.
Yeah. David Clyde is a fellow. There's an expression that I learned when Yu Darvish was signed by the Texas Rangers many a year ago, that in Texas, telling someone that you are all hat and no cattle is a very disparaging expression. There's nothing of substance to you. Our guest tonight is anything that. As he's told me countless number of times, he's tried to be honest. He's tried to live up to his word. If he tells you he's going to do something one day, you're not going to have to call him a week later to remind him or question why he didn't follow through. He's always said words are cheap, and we're all judged by our deeds in this life. So, ladies and gentlemen, I have had the distinct pleasure to know David Clyde for about 9 years now. We each call one another our blood brothers because he considers me family, I consider him family. Without any further ado, I want to introduce this family member to our Mad Radio Network family. Ladies and gentlemen, the number one first draft pick in the 73 draft, the iconic Texas Ranger and Cleveland Indian, David Clyde. David, welcome to Mad Radio.
Well, Doug, I thank you very much for those kind words. You keep putting me up on that tall pedestal. It's an awful long fall to the floor, so we'll do our best to live up to it, because you did put it aptly that we are blood brothers, and you're welcome in my home anytime, any place.
Where is home for you, David? Is it Kitty or Katy, Texas?
Actually, it's Humble.
Oh,
it's spelled like humble, but the H is silent. So if you ever talk to anybody and you see the word Humble, Texas, you better pronounce it Humble, or they're going to know you're a foreigner.
Well, I guess the David Clyde story really begins, and I've never said this publicly, but I remember David Clyde was eating breakfast. Now, David and I are only separated by 5 years. David Clyde was eating breakfast on the Today Show. I remember Gary Trudeau's wife, Jane Pauley, and I guess Brian Gumble and Gene Shalit were feeding him food. And I said, how cool is this guy? I mean, he had a senior year at Winchester High School. It's now the public charter school, Westchester Academy for the International Studies. He went 18-0 in 148 innings. He racked up 328 strikeouts. He had an earned run average of, and this is not an error, folks, 0.18. And I said to myself, he's eating breakfast on the damn Today Show. This is a guy who's only 5 years older than me. And I was amazed. And David, can you take us back to June of '73? I mean, you just graduated. You 3 weeks after your high school prom, there you are. You know, and I should add that the Texas Rangers brought David up basically as a PR gimmick. Not that David is not talented or wasn't talented, but in 1972, the Texas Rangers drew 662,000 and change. That's only 8,840 a game. And until David's first start, they were below 40,000, below 1972's attendance. So, you know, business as usual was after David's first start. All 35,698 seats in Arlington Stadium were sold by the morning of David's first start, and the next morning it was only 3,992. So, David, you know, you got the 4-3 victory over the Twins that night. I think officially you went 5 innings. You threw 112 pitches. You struck out 8. You only allowed 1 hit. Yes, you did walk 7. But what is that like for an 18-year-old kid?
Well, it's the better part of 50 years later, and I still can't put it in words, Doug. The closest I can come to describing the situation is imagine your wildest dream of what you could ever dream of doing, and then waking up right in the middle of it and actually experiencing it. I mean,
Mark, you ever have a dream like that?
Yeah, we all had those dreams, and only a few people actually got to live those out, like David. David, I just want to say a shout-out from a guy named Mark Littell. You might have heard of him. He says he remembers.
I do, yes. I do know Mark. We played in the instructional league together. He was in the